Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at Mix and Madness. Today, just going to take you through the process of me making this Valentine's Day themed pendant. And I wasn't really sure in the beginning where I was going to go with it. I had drawn it out and had an idea somewhat of what I wanted. I did change it up a little bit during the making process, but this is me making it. That's what this is. So if you enjoy this or learn something from it, or if you just want to, subscribe and comment, like the video, and share if you'd like. It helps the channel out, or helps me out for my channel, and keeps awesome content coming. So here I have some Polymer Clay, and I had this sitting around for a couple months. It was some that I had previously mixed for something else, and so I believe, I'm about 98% sure that this is black and pearl mixed together, Polymer Clay, and it made this gunmetal color. And it had been sitting around because I wasn't really sure what I was going to use it for, or if I ever would find anything to use it for. So when I was drawing out the idea of what I wanted to create, I remembered that I had this clay, or this color, and I kind of played off of that. I wanted a dark background so that the other elements would stand out, and in my design I had the pink and purple, and that was it. But as I was making it, I realized that it really needed something to make it pop, so I added some white later on. This is just some pink pearl, it's all Polymer Clay, and I was going to put little dots of clay around the outside, but once I set it on there and compared that to a flattened out dot, the flattened out ones looked a lot better. It took up more space and it just filled it in. So I think I doubled up the pieces that I cut here to make the dots. I know I added a little bit to each one to make them slightly bigger, because see, I put it there and it didn't look right. I used the poly clay, or liquid clay, to put on the smaller dots. I was going to use it for these, but once I had flattened them, I didn't really need it because I was able to push them down. But for the round little balls that I make later on, I use the poly clay, or liquid clay, whatever you want to call it. I use that so that I don't have to push down on them and end up flattening them out. And there's not much else to this. I really just went along and played off the idea that I had drawn out and seen if it looked good. If it didn't, then I would change it up and, you know, go from there. And here I took two different colors of purple and mixed them together because I didn't really like either one. So it's more of a, it's a light and a dark, but it's, one of them was kind of almost a neon. It wasn't quite neon, but I didn't like it. So I rolled out a snake, and then I just took my pasta machine down one click each time so that I didn't ravel the edges too much. And then cut each side so that I had a clean cut. And I was going for a diamond shape, but I really just cut squares and turned them slightly so that that's kind of what it looked like. I didn't go through the trouble of cutting out perfect diamonds or anything like that. I didn't really go through the trouble of making any of this absolutely perfect, because as I went, I realized that it's just not possible unless I spent tedious amounts of time doing each little element by itself individually, and I wasn't going to do that. So here I'm rolling out pink clay again because in my design, the next thing that I had was pink dots, or I thought I had pink dots. I don't know. I wasn't paying attention at this point. The next piece that I have is the teardrop shapes. And so I roll out a thicker bit of clay, cut it into pieces, and I tried to cut these as even as I could. Some of them are not so even, but cut these, and then I rolled them into a ball, and then I just tapered one end and flattened them out, and that gave me the teardrop shape that I was looking for. And this took me a couple of times to get it right the way I wanted. Because if you make the end of the teardrop really pointed, then you're going to get a really pointed teardrop. And if it's kind of blunt, then, you know, the end of your teardrop will kind of be round. So it takes a little practice to get it exactly the way you want. Alright, so here's where I added the liquid clay, and then I put the purple balls down, or dots, whatever. And here I'm making a lintel bead. I just took some pink and purple clay, mixed it together, and I tried a couple of times to do this by hand with the glass, and I could not get it right. So if you see there, I had 2 pieces of cardboard stacked up evenly, and I used that as a guide. And for anybody that is trying to make lintel beads for the first time, use that. Do that, because you will get so frustrated trying to keep it even with your fingertips that you just give up. And I did, until I thought about it, and I was like, wait a minute, let me try this. So I made me a little, you know, depth guide, and just kept doing it slowly and practiced until I swirled it just right. So I swirled my lintel bead, flattened it out, and then took the dull edge of my knife and made the top part go down. Then you see I perfected it with the silicone tool there. And here's where I added the little white dots around on top of the purple, and I added a little dot of liquid clay on there before I put those on, just to make sure that they stuck really well. And then I added in that rhinestone on the corner of the heart up there, because it needed something to help it sparkle. So you bake it and drill it, and now I've got all these different beads set out because I wasn't sure how I wanted to do it. I had a couple of ideas in mind, but my mind is so scattered when I'm creating. It's hard for me to come up with things, because it's a confused mind says no, and when you have all these different things out in front of you, it really gets confusing, and then you just like, okay, I can't do this. So I picked out some coordinating colors that I thought would look good. I ended up using way less beads, or way less different type of beads than I thought I would. I'm kind of a coordinated matchy type person. I like things to go together. I wanted to put some blue in there on the strands, but I couldn't make myself do it because there was no blue in the pendant. And it just, I don't know why, I just could not make myself do it. It might have looked great, but I don't know. Since there was no blue in the pendant, I thought there shouldn't be any blue in the necklace strands. So, I didn't use any of these beads that I'm pouring out, because what I was going to do was do 2 different strands and have those have a hole on each side. I was going to do 2 strands with the smaller beads on each strand, and then the silver ones with the 2 holes as kind of like connecting, you know, holding both of the strands parallel together. I didn't use those. What I ended up doing was just doing 3 strands, randomly placing beads on there. And the beads that you see in front of you, all but these up here, these silver long ones up here in the top or bottom right corner, is what I used. The 5 different beads that are there is the only thing that I used in the strands. I did this by hand for a little bit, and then I strung up a needle, and I did it with thread, and I glued the end of the thread to the end of the fishing line, and they just slid right on. So it made it go much faster. And here I'm finishing up. I've already done one end, and I have a metal bead there to just kind of hold the 3 strands together and make the finished end look a little better. I've got the 3 strands, and that little thing is for like cords and things like that, or they're called cord ends, I believe. I had a box of those, and I did not know that they had these really little ones in there, so I'm very thankful that they did, because it went perfect with this. And the other ones that were in there were just going to be way too big. But thankfully, they had these little bitty ones in there, and it worked. Put the 3 strands together, put the bead on there, and then I just super glued it in just for some extra hold, and crimped it down. And then once it's crimped down, you know, give it a tug, make sure it's not going to come off. And then I just took my X-Acto knife and cut off the extra bit of string flush with the metal that was on it. And then I added my jump rings and the clasp at the end of it, and it was done. You'll see here in a minute that I really struggle at the end with putting the jump ring around the bottom part of it to attach the pendant, and that's because I wanted a smaller jump ring so that it would hold the 3 strands together better and kind of like close together, but it was not working. So I ended up having to go with a much larger, it was actually a 10 millimeter split ring, and it's able to move and slide along the beads. So I guess, you know, you can make sure it's always in the center. That's not what I wanted, but it ended up working out. So that's the way I did that. See, I pulled and make sure it was on there, and then just cut the string off. Alright, so here is where I'm adding the polyacrylic. I had originally planned to add this, but I completely forgot. I was about to put the jumpering on, and then I was like, oh yeah, I forgot to do that. So that's why I'm doing it now at the very end. You should probably do this after it's done baking, before you start assembling and all of that. Thankfully, I realized it before I got everything put together, and finally went and got a bigger jump ring to use, and had to use it. But yeah, see, this just wasn't working. I really wanted it to, but it wasn't going to. Okay, so for anyone that is wondering why I have pink finger gloves on, it is because I have eczema, and I've got band-aids on both fingers. I've got band-aids on it, and I didn't want anything getting on my fingers to irritate my skin more than it was already irritated. The glue that I work with, you know, the polyacrylic, things like that, I try to keep it off of those areas as much as possible. And working with chemicals and clays and things like that while having eczema is a big struggle. If you have it, you'll understand where I'm coming from. I added a dab of glue on that just to kind of help it to not come apart. I don't like using jump rings for that reason, but I do. Because, I mean, you have no choice. Alright, and that is the finished piece. I hope you guys enjoyed this. It was helpful, and you may have learned something. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this, and I will see you all in the next video, and I hope you all have a wonderful Valentine's Day. Bye!